At 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, an HOA Karen made a $2.3 million mistake that would land her in federal prison for 8 years, and it all started with a pair of bolt cutters in the wrong military vehicle. Clang. The sound of those bolt cutters biting through my security chain echoed through perfect suburban silence like gunshots. That metallic snap, that was the moment Bethany Kensington Wright went from HOA president to federal felon in 30 seconds. See, while I was deployed overseas fighting drug cartels, this power-hungry suburban dictator decided my eyesore vehicle needed to disappear. What she didn't know, that Jeep belonged to a federal drug task force, was loaded with $347,000 worth of classified surveillance equipment, and I'm the kind of federal agent who specializes in taking down criminal organizations. She thought she was stealing some soldier's truck. She actually committed federal crimes that would make cartel bosses jealous. My name is Marcus Rodriguez, and 3 months ago, I thought inheriting my grandmother's house would be a blessing. Boy, was I wrong. Willowbrook Estates, picture-perfect suburban hell where every house is the same shade of beige. I'm Army Reserve MP, recently accepted into a federal drug task force. Grandma Rose's house was supposed to be my safety net. Rent it out during deployment, build equity, honor the woman who raised me after my parents died. That house still smells like her homemade tortillas. Every creaky floorboard holds memories of her teaching me right from wrong. She'd say, "You stand up to bullies, but you do it the right way." Enter Bethany Kensington Wright. Picture a 52-year-old real estate agent who drives a white Lexus SUV and, get this, measures grass height with an actual ruler. 7 years as HOA president has turned her into a suburban dictator. Her husband Carl sits on city council, making her feel untouchable. 2 weeks into my deployment, the email hits my inbox. Violation notice. Unauthorized commercial vehicle storage. My government-issued Jeep Wrangler, clearly marked with federal law enforcement decals, was apparently an eyesore. Here's what she didn't know. That Jeep contains $200,000 worth of surveillance equipment for active cartel investigations. GPS trackers, encrypted radios, covert cameras, federal property that requires department authorization to relocate. The fine. $50 per day accumulating while I'm dodging bullets overseas. My sister Maya, sweet middle school teacher Maya, tried reasoning with this suburban tyrant. She drove over to explain I was deployed, showed copies of my orders, even offered to cover the Jeep with a tarp. Rules are rules, Bethany snapped, looking down at Maya like she was a bug. If your brother cannot follow simple community standards, maybe this neighborhood isn't right for your family. That phone call from Maya still echoes in my head. The sound of her voice cracking as she sat in Grandma's kitchen. Tank, she threatened to put a lien on the house. She said Carl knows people at the school district that supporting you could affect my job. Maya discovered the pattern. The Johnsons, he's a Marine, got cited for his motorcycle being excessively loud. Sarah Martinez, Navy wife with a deployed husband, was fined for garden gnomes being unprofessional. Every military family in Willowbrook was getting targeted. But here's the kicker. Bethany's violations were made up. I had Maya check the actual HOA bylaws buried in my grandmother's papers. Government vehicles were specifically exempted. Emergency services, military, law enforcement, all protected. Bethany was literally fabricating rules, counting on residents being too intimidated or ignorant to check. That's when I realized what I was really dealing with. This wasn't about parking or property values. This was organized harassment of military families by a corrupt HOA board with political protection. Bethany's next move came 48 hours later, and it was pure suburban warfare. A registered letter hit Maya's mailbox demanding immediate vehicle removal or emergency towing within 24 hours. Not 48 hours, 24. Maya called me from Grandma's kitchen, and I could hear the panic in her voice. Tank, there's a tow truck circling the block. The driver keeps looking at your Jeep like he's sizing it up. That's when I unleashed my first counter-punch. I contacted JAG, Judge Advocate General, military lawyers who specialize in eating constitutional violations for breakfast. Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams took one look at my case file. Rodriguez, this woman just threatened to steal federal law enforcement property. That's not an HOA violation. That's a federal felony. Here's something most people don't know. The Service Members Civil Relief Act doesn't just protect military personnel from contract disputes. It specifically prohibits harassment of deployed service members' property. But more importantly, my Jeep isn't just my vehicle. It's federal law enforcement equipment owned by the United States government. Williams immediately filed a formal complaint, triggering something beautiful, a federal military liaison review. Suddenly, Bethany's little power trip was on the radar of people with actual authority. But here's where I discovered the real twist, and it made everything personal. Maya started digging through Grandma's old HOA documents, and buried in a stack of meeting minutes from 2019, she found a smoking gun. A letter from Bethany to the City Planning Commission recommending against military housing assistance programs in Willowbrook because transient military populations don't maintain long-term community investment standards. Translation? She'd been trying to keep military families out of our neighborhood for years. Maya's voice cracked when she told me. Tank, she's been systematically targeting every military family that moves here. This wasn't random HOA tyranny. This was organized discrimination with political backing. See, Carl had a development deal pending. Luxury condos requiring HOA approval, military families with their unsightly work vehicles and unpredictable deployment schedules hurt the exclusive community marketing angle. My counterpunch was swift and devastating. I remotely activated the GPS tracking and security systems in my Jeep, standard equipment for task force operations. The data was beautiful. Bethany had been trespassing on my property 17 times in 3 days, photographing federal law enforcement equipment without authorization. That's not just harassment. That's potential espionage. The moment Bethany cut my lock, she triggered a federal alert system that pinged Homeland Security databases across 3 states. Maya kept recording when Bethany made her fatal mistake. After the tow truck driver fled, she changed the locks on the community gate, effectively imprisoning my federal vehicle and blocking law enforcement access. The community uprising began when Mrs. Patterson witnessed Bethany's public breakdown from her front window. This sweet elderly woman who'd survived the Great Depression and buried 2 military sons wasn't about to watch some HOA Karen terrorize a deployed soldier's family. She called every neighbor, every veteran in Willowbrook. By 10 a.m., my grandmother's house was surrounded by protective neighbors forming a human shield around federal property. This stops right here, right now, declared Tom Henderson, 72-year-old Vietnam vet. You want that boy's vehicle, you go through 30 American veterans first. The breaking point came when federal marshals arrived and discovered Bethany had changed the community gate locks, preventing federal agents from accessing their own stolen property. That's obstruction of federal justice. Marshal Jennifer Torres, a no-nonsense federal agent who'd arrested cartel bosses, took one look at the locked gate. Ma'am, you've obstructed federal agents investigating theft of government property. Open this gate immediately or face additional federal charges. Bethany's response sealed her fate forever. I don't recognize federal authority over private HOA property. You people have no jurisdiction in my community. She just declared war on the United States government while standing in her bathrobe. Game over. I landed stateside 72 hours later to find Maya sitting in Grandma's kitchen, surrounded by enough evidence to topple a small government. Tank, you need to see this before the feds get here. I found something that changes everything. The manila folders contained 5 years of HOA financial records. But buried in the stack was a document that made my blood run cold. A contract between Carl's company and a development corporation dated 6 months before I inherited Grandma's house. Tank, they weren't just harassing military families randomly. They were systematically clearing properties for a massive development deal. Carl's company had pre-sold 47 properties in Willowbrook for luxury condos, properties they didn't even own yet, including Grandma's house. Look at the target list. Every military family, every elderly resident, every person who couldn't fight back. All marked for acquisition facilitation. But here's the revelation that changed everything. Bethany had been forging HOA violations. Maya showed me the original 1987 HOA bylaws, the real ones. Military vehicles weren't just allowed, they were specifically protected. The HOA financial records revealed systematic embezzlement. Over 3 years, $184,000 in community funds had been diverted to Carl's development company through fabricated contracts. Maya revealed the final piece. Tank, I think they killed her. She showed me violation notices sent to Grandma during her final hospice weeks. Citations for property maintenance failures against a dying woman who couldn't even get out of bed. The stress, her blood pressure spiked every time one arrived. The hospice nurse said she kept asking if we'd lose the house. Maya's transformation was complete. Tank, this isn't about your Jeep anymore. This is about organized crime disguised as community governance. They've been destroying families for profit. Captain Chin arrived with 2 federal prosecutors. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez spread Maya's evidence across every surface. Rodriguez, I've prosecuted cartel money laundering operations with less documentation than this. When suburban tyrants engage in systematic fraud and discrimination affecting multiple states, they become federal organized crime. Maya's evidence showed a pattern of criminal enterprise, embezzlement, fraud, civil rights violations, all coordinated between Carl's city council position and Bethany's HOA authority. The allies gathering in Grandma's living room looked like a resistance movement. Tom Henderson brought his Vietnam vet network. Mrs. Patterson contributed surveillance photos. Maya's teacher union provided media expertise. Maya's door-to-door campaign revealed the scope of Bethany's tyranny. Within 72 hours, Maya collected signatures from 67% of Willowbrook residents demanding immediate board removal. Maya's election as interim HOA president happened by acclamation. Watching her take the gavel in the same community center where Bethany had terrorized families for years, that was justice served cold. The Willowbrook Estates Community Center had never seen anything like this. Packed beyond capacity with federal agents lining the walls, news cameras from 6 stations, and military families from across 3 states. Bethany arrived fashionably late in her white Lexus, pulling up to a gauntlet of protesters. The sound of her designer heels was drowned out by veterans chanting "Thank you for your service," directed at Maya, not her. Maya took the podium first. For 5 years, these people used their positions to wage war against military families. They fabricated rules, embezzled funds, and coordinated discrimination campaigns that violated every principle this country stands for. Federal prosecutor Rebecca Martinez stepped forward. The United States government has compiled overwhelming evidence of criminal conspiracy involving federal property theft, civil rights violations, witness intimidation, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. But the mic drop moment belonged to me. Bethany Kensington Wright thought she was cutting locks on some soldier's personal vehicle. What she actually did was interfere with an active federal drug operation, compromise classified surveillance equipment, and steal property belonging to the United States government. That Jeep contained surveillance equipment worth $347,000 and evidence from ongoing cartel investigations spanning 4 states. When she cut those locks at dawn, she didn't just commit theft. She compromised national security operations. Bethany's face went the color of old concrete as the true scope of her federal stupidity became clear. Federal Marshal Jennifer Torres moved with practiced precision. Bethany Kensington Wright, you're under arrest for theft of federal law enforcement property, conspiracy to violate civil rights, embezzlement of community funds, witness intimidation, and obstruction of federal justice. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed through speakers as cameras captured the moment suburban tyranny met federal consequences. Carl tried fleeing through the back exit but ran straight into federal agents who'd anticipated exactly that move. 18 months later, I stood in Grandma's kitchen reading the final sentencing report. Bethany received 8 years in federal prison with no parole, plus $647,000 in restitution. The federal judge's words became legendary. Your systematic harassment of military families represents domestic terrorism disguised as community governance. Carl got 6 years and lifetime prohibition from public office. His development empire collapsed completely. But the real victory was watching our neighborhood transform from a place of fear into a community that protects its own. Maya revolutionized HOA governance, implementing bylaws that became the national model for military family protection. The Veteran Memorial Park sits where Bethany's house once stood. Children now play on swings where suburban tyranny once lived. The Rodriguez Foundation for Military Family Rights became Maya's calling. Congressional legislation now requires HOA financial transparency and protects military families. Military families have federal rights that no HOA can override, and communities have power to remove corrupt boards when they organize together. My favorite moment happens every morning when I see the flag flying over houses where military families live without fear. This is what victory tastes like: justice served, community healed, and the knowledge that bullies can be defeated when good people organize and fight back.